strange, but we're here.
Ve- Very strange. Well, thank you for agreeing to do this art talk with us tonight. Uh, where it's a strange situation when you deal with all these tech issues. But for everybody that's on here, my name is Alan Kett. Up top is APEXER. This is the Museum of Graffiti's live art talk series. We bring you these talks every week to meet members of the global writing community and get into their stories and learn from them and get a bit of history. And so we're excited to have you on here tonight. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Of course, and we're excited to learn about your history. And so, as someone that's from the East Coast, we don't get enough to connect, enough a chance to connect and to really learn about what's happening over there. But I'm a student, and everybody here at the museum is a student of this writing movement. And so I wanted just to start off by asking you to share with us how you fell into this love for writing in the streets. What was it that, got you aware and interested, if you can remember?
Oh no, I remember. It was like the biggest WTF to me. I want to say 80, early 80s. Here in San Francisco, I was in third grade, and that was when I was conscious of it in third grade, and bombing was just everywhere here in the city at that time. So just as a kid coming from school, going home, looking out the window, it was always like, what is that? You see, and back then, it was, the Banner Reds, the True Blues, the, leather browns, those traditional older colors that everybody was bombing with that just captured me. And then a schoolmate of mine in elementary school, his older brother was in a gang and gave him a streaker, a mean streak. And from there, it was a wrap. Like I never turned away from it.
And so when did you become Apex or Apexer? Because I know we typically hear about people going through many, many names.
Right. Apexer came along in 93. 93 is when I took on APEXER. Yeah.
And so were you already, obviously you were tagging, writing, piecing, bombing. Where were you on sort of the writing arc?
Out here, you kind of had to do it all. But I never really count the earlier stuff. That was all like me fumbling around trying to figure it out. And even early 90s, I would say I was still trying to figure it out. And at that time, it was strictly insides, hand styles, bus hopping. New York insides. Out here in San Francisco, we called it bus hopping. We had trains, but really it was all about the buses because the buses went to every neighborhood. And so out here, the mean streaks, the ultra wides, the stainers, the streakers, the two-tone streakers, juicing up your ultras, your unis, all of that was where I was at in the early 90s. And although I would go rack and get paint and go paint at spots pieces, my main thing, and just because of access, was just bus hopping, doing insides.
And so it was strictly on the insides, no outsides of the buses?
Oh, of course. Yeah, you hop off, you do the inside, then you hop off, and then you hit the outside. And then if you're feeling bold, you pop the little rungs for the workers to go up to check the wires up top, and you hit a top panel. You name it. Anything around the bus was the thing, from the shelters, the bus stops to the buses, and everything about that was one thing.
And so was there a sense of community outside of, let's say, your school, of high school or middle school? Where could you possibly meet other writers at the time?
There was, so early 90s, one of our Hall of Fames, our big Hall of Fame, Psycho City, was in its downturn. It was at its height, but at the same time, it was around the corner before it was going to get whitewashed. And that was always like, oh, such and such is down there doing a piece or doing a new production. So writers would go down there on like a citywide level. And that was more like the Terror Dome because you don't know who you're going to run into from different crews, different high schools, different sets. That was right on Market Street, which is kind of like New York Broadway for us. And outside of that, every neighborhood kind of had like their like writer's bench. You know, you had like in the Mission, you had like 16th and 24th and Mission. Those were like writer benches because that's where the lines intersected. Further up in Excelsior is where you had Geneva Mission, which was a wild place because you had all the writers there. You had all the different gangs that were there. And it was just a wild time to be out because it was more than just other writers you have to look out for. But that's what made it what it was, you know, to test you, test your heart.
And so, you know, in that sort of adventure that is youth of being out there and roaming the streets and sort of learning how to navigate the streets, where were your parents in all this? You know, how did your parents feel about your choice of hobby or activity?
Oh, you know, the classic scenario. They hated it. They were like, you know, what is that? What are you doing? You know, all those scenarios that we know of. And I got in trouble left and right. But it was something that it was by that time, you know, by '90s, it was in my blood already. It was like you're not. It wasn't going anywhere. You know, like I was an older sister worked downtown in an office building. I got a hold of her Uline book, but with the corporate discount. So I started buying markers and ink. My locker had no books in it. My backpack had all my books. My locker was like a little writer's, you know, shop with inks, markers, stickers, you name it. Um, so at that time, I was fully into it. And my parents, they just, you know, I just got in trouble, but I just kept going. Didn't care.
Incredible. And so from there, where did you learn or how did you learn style? I know, you know, style is such a big thing. Where did you start getting your cues from and how did you start to develop, you know, that understanding?
Oh, well, out here in the Bay Area, style was like always a big deal, and it was that era and that group of guys. They had their moment and their contingencies with one another. But you know, having family all around the city, I saw the different crews and the different styles from different people, and grew up with like that fundamental style that like East Coast guys would know as like semi straights. You know, grew up with that, and with the TMF, the MDCs, the TMCs, like all those guys. I grew up in that neighborhood, and then later you have like the and you know, and then the East Coast. I mean, not East Coast, in East Bay, you had TDK, you had KTD, you had these other crews who were painting over there, and then you add a little bit of this is my early foundation. You know, you add a little TWS and WCF, what those guys were doing down in San Jose. So like really bring together. My thinking at a young on was like, how can I make room for myself, but keeping traditions to what I saw. And that was like the very beginnings. And this is like an early piece that we're looking at here. This was really influenced off of uh, the bus hopper, the insides of like the one flow. This was in the Coliseum Yard in Oakland. And this is all, if you look at it, it's like a lowercase a, and then it kind of just flips back and forward on itself. It's just like a one flow, one bar kind of style. This is in '97.
Right, it's all entirely connected.
It's all entirely connected off of one bar and just looping back on itself. Um, and then after that time period, I really just started like drilling in and becoming a student. You know, like really enjoying the history of writing and becoming a student, and that never stopped. It still hasn't stopped, but it never stopped, and it got to a point where I met Neon BA crew, used to do Montana here in the US. Met Neon, and then the number one thing I would say is he was just like, oh, this guy's down to paint. So we just painted all the time. We racked and painted all the time. And that really helped develop my style because then I got to test out what I was doing and why I was doing it, you know? And then in 98 went to Paint Lewis, saw these other styles in person, saw people painting it in person. And that really made me step my game up even more. And then I want to say right after 98 and 99, went out to New York. 98, end of 98, went out to New York, and they had like the big jam in Binghamton. I don't know if you remember
Yes.
that.
Yes.
And painted there in Binghamton, hung out with a lot of people, met a lot of people. And then that's the first time that I met Vulcan through Dooley, of all people, put us in touch. And then when he put us in touch and together, we would just like, you know, mental sparring, you know, on the math of style. And then Vulcan connected me with Phase and Riff, and then that was just like a, you know, a compression time machine box of me just getting that knowledge. And then also, you know, I would go out to New York and I wouldn't even ask for people to sign my book or nothing. I just wanted to sit there and be a little sponge and just understand why people did what they did. You know, going to Five Points, going up in Harlem, going to different art shows and just meeting different writers and just kind of being quiet. And a lot of New Yorkers were just like, yo, you from the West Coast? Like, how did you find this spot? And I was like, you know, I always was that young kid, even though I was older now, of just, I loved it and have faith in digging in that history, living history, to find my own thumbprint, you know, my own style.
Sure. I mean, it's pretty fascinating to hear that you're able to travel as a young man over here and meet those people of all people, the Phases, the Riffs, the Vulcans, people that really had a deep understanding or really that made history, right? That invented lots of
Yeah.
the things that we see or use today, and to actually be able to sit down and talk to them and get that information, that knowledge is quite remarkable.
Yeah, it was, you know, I felt really honored that I was able to get these invites to these doors, you know, TAT's office, to, you know, at the Hall of Fame, sit down and just kind of listen to Doc, you know, explain what he's doing. Just, you know, and other writers talking about, you know, Broadway styles and all these different things, you know, just really taking it in and, you know, respecting that I was in somebody else's house, in somebody else's city, and bringing that home. You know, like I want to say that I see a couple of homies are saying, talk about this piece here. This piece wouldn't exist if I didn't have permission for this wall. But in 99, I came back from New York and I told Neon at the time, I said, you know, you see how that crew has the 5 line and this crew has the 2s and this crew has the 6. And that's how they're able to get these walls and to get their, you know, to be seen. So it's not just underneath the train tracks or on the tracks. Those are still cool. But to actually do something, you have to have these walls. So I went out that year and just hounded so many stores and businesses, corner stores. This is on a liquor store. And just say, hey, can I paint your wall? Can I paint your wall? Over and over. So that, and then that was like the next evolution of, okay, now I have these permission spots, but I'm not going to treat them like, I'm not going to treat them as if it's my gallery. I'm going to treat it, me and Neon are thinking, well, we're going to treat it as a way that we have more time to do what we wanted to do in the yard. So we just kept pushing ourselves. And
Got
this piece here was like, we saw, this was after the first Matrix came out. And you know, Neo, for the Matrix fans, was like, you know, doing all the fast movement, and you see all the tracing of his hands and arms. So here I was doing a 3D piece that had like that movement, that tracing going on as if it was moving around.
Very, very cool. And I think that's a very great point that you shared, and moment in history, and just and how it works. Like, people ask, well, how do you get walls? How do you go out and how do you do this? How do you connect dots? And you figured it out just by going and seeing what everybody else is doing. Like, you go and you acquire them. You have to knock on doors and you have to hustle to be able to get the locations that you want. No one's giving them away. You actually have to go out and search for it, and sort of show up as an adult and say, hey, I'm an artist and I want to do this. And so
Right.
it's great to hear that, because that's part of the work of being on the streets. If you want these bigger walls, if you want to have time, if you don't want to necessarily be on the track sides or in abandoned buildings, if you want to be on Front Street, you got to talk to the people. You got to talk to members of your community to get it. There's
Right.
no other way about it. And so, so you go to New York, you meet these guys, and I have a question. We touched on this earlier. There's, in particular for with that group of individuals, the phases and the Vulcans and the riffs, they frowned upon the use of the term graffiti and moved towards the term style writing or writing. Was that something that you already had experienced on on your coast? Was that even a conversation, or was that a conversation that sort of was started by those folks and introduced to you?
So they reminded me of something that I knew of, and I wasn't being that critical about. Um, so out here, and I think this goes for a lot of people on an individual level, when you think about it, that you see another person with some paint on their shoes, on their fingers, on their jacket, and you go up to him and say, "Hey, yo, what you write?" Especially on doing insides, doing bus hopping, you see somebody with ink drip somewhere. They got gurped out. Like you're like, oh, okay, yeah. What do you write? And I remembered that, and then grow up in society terminology. You just kind of go along with it, like, oh, okay, yeah, I do graffiti. But when I met those guys and I was saying that, some people know this, that they're really hardcore about that. And for me, they were just like, yo, why do you call that? And I really didn't have a reason. And then they said, what do we do? We're writing our names. We're writers. And I was like, right. And then it brought me back to being a kid and hopping on buses and say, oh, yeah, I would ask, like, what do you write? Even if it was disrespectful, we would still ask, like, what do you write? And so at that moment, it was that easy for me to just go, okay, yeah, I'm a writer. I'm not that. That's another terminology that fits a certain group, but I'm a writer. And from within the culture, we're writers. We write our name. Doesn't matter if it's legal, illegal. And then that was just something that was reminded me and instilled in my brain. And then we started talking about style and worldly stuff.
So thank you for sharing that. And so here, the previous piece, the Matrix piece, that's one thing. Here you have something totally different. Many writers get caught up in a singular style, but just between that piece and this piece, it's completely different. What were you thinking about? Where was your mind at this point?
This piece I actually like a lot, for an odd reason. This was one I stretched out with a New York thin on a tall boy Clover Green hard hat resto, and I was able to fill in this whole piece with one can of that, um, painstakingly just doing that. But this particular style, other people have thrown all kind of names at it, but for me, my style, it was a circular style because everything was rounded off. And this really, for me, was it originated with scene saying bits and doodads. And, you know, and in that scene, he's doing a bit, which is just like a chopped off end of a bar. And me thinking about history and me thinking about like, how can I do my own style? What can I do? I was like, oh, well, what if you had a circle on the end? And I was like, well, how does that make sense? Like, oh, well, you have to round out the edge of the bar so that you can have a circle bit. And then from there, I kind of looked at the rest of the style, kind of backed it up just off of that circle, the rounded edge in a circle. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I have to make everything more fluid. And then I played with the style over the years, making it more fluid, thick, thin strokes. Um, but that's what this style comes from. It's just
And it looks like the beginning, like you said, liquid, or about to say liquid, and it looks like, you know, something that you end up sort of carrying with you for many years, even though it sort of, I think, morphs into something else.
100%. I've actually entertained in the back of my head of like, I need to uh, go back to this style for, you know, a new piece coming up and update it.
So let's look at other versions of this. This is similar with the like you were saying, the bits, but not exactly as fluid. Well, actually, it does look pretty fluid as well.
Yeah, this one was fluid. This was all about being more of like a traditional kind of like boxed in, taking a mass chunk of the wall out. So it was tighter, floating, had a whole background going on with it. Painted this one with neon. We had matching color schemes. You know, we were playing more on that production concept with this one.
And how much, and I'm guessing this is, you know, in these walls that you were getting at the time and just out in the public to see, or were these in hidden spots?
This one was, and I just repainted this wall a couple years ago. I've been painting this wall for I think 22 years now.
Wow.
Um, this one is South of Market in San Francisco, and this was one of those walls. Like when I came back, I was like, okay, let me get these locations just so that we could do what we want.
Holding down a wall for 22 years is no easy feat.
Nah. It's but you know you got to do it though.
And it's, you know, and it's a commitment to having, you know, art in a certain community. It's, you know, you become part of that community. You know, how much do you connect with, let's say, that community where this wall lives as a result of being there, or, you know, or give, you know, donating art to that block for so long?
Wow, that's a so interesting story with when I did that. I believe that was 2 years ago or a year and a half. Yeah, I think yeah, 2 years ago when I had just finished it right before all this. So they, when we started it, you name it, you know, think of old for New York kids, think of like Old Bowery for or Skid Row down to LA, South of Market for people out here in the Bay Area that knows what's up. That was all was there. And Harvey's, the spot is called Harvey's because it was on a liquor store called Harvey's. And he was old school man that he let like all the bike messengers come in, have credit if they didn't have the money, they could pay him later. There was an old bike messenger spot right down the street, like the HQ for it. Uh, you know, homeless people, crackheads, dealers, users, you name it, it was all there. And it got to a point where they all knew us just from the style. And it was something about that, like you felt part of the community. It wasn't like you're outside of the community, like you're really in it. And that's, when the news and everything's telling you to look down on these people and you actually are on the ground with them and you get to see like, oh, you know, like they're people too. And it's actually a nicer community, you know, like people are more blunt and straightforward with one another, but it's dope. So that, being part of the community, like, and then we could be painting in the Tenderloin or in the Mission, and somebody from that community would be over there and say, "Oh, yo, what's up, Apex?" And they just knew us. That was something that was a first inkling of like connecting the city through art, through writing. through something that, you know, growing up might be looked down upon, that like now, like, okay, we're doing pieces and productions and burners, and it's free for people, you know, and people are connecting a community through that. Fast forward, um, somebody was trying, you were saying, to hold down a wall for 22 years. A muralist not from our culture was trying to come in and take the spot, and I got the phone call through somebody that was working with her. So I go down to the corner store, which is now on its third owner, and he was like, "Yo, we were going to paint over it, but all these people started coming up to us and saying that, like, don't touch it. This guy, he's been painting there forever." So you know, even after the neighborhood has completely changed, uh, just like almost every major city in this country, that the new, and then when I was painting it, the new neighbors, a few of the old ones that are still there, were like proud that I was doing it, because it was like, it
Yes.
was artwork, that connection. And then even the new neighbors were kind of like, oh yeah, that guy, like, oh okay. So it was a, you know, I kind of went into it because somebody wanted to go over it with like a negative attitude, and then immediately that got flipped when everybody was they had ownership in it as well.
That's an amazing story. I guess, you know, a story that speaks to gentrification, the stories that speaks to the how communities change, but how important public art is to everybody. And so for some people that were there maybe from the beginning, and those few people that stood still around, you know, you might be one of the few artists that came to the neighborhood to paint murals, to paint
Right,
burners. And so for them, you're very special, you know, and you holding that wall down is a very special. They might remember their first kiss and tie it to that wall, like they might have met on that wall. And so, you know, when the neighborhoods change, that sort of history goes away. New people
right.
come in, they don't have that history, but to hear that people defended your right to hold on to that wall is a great testament to the power and to the beauty that you've brought to those people. So big up to you for doing that and for holding
Thank,
it down for so long.
yeah, thank you, thank you.
You know, and so, you know, you go through these styles and, you know, we see a much more complex style. You know, in this image, you see a much a simpler, more of a plain style. And so from what I can see from the images online, you run the gamut in sort of experimenting with letters, but more and more I see wilder pieces,
Right.
you know, and you push yourself to create works that are not necessarily run of the mill. And why is that your choice, and why is that the path?
Well, it for me, it's like a three-step thing. It's the tag to the semi straight. Like on that image on the bottom, I had extra time, so I did like a gold little straight light on like a little 2 foot wall or whatever that is down there. And uh, you know, so you go from a tag to that. You know, like I always had that in my head to kind of like just reset it. You know, the tag to the throw up to the piece to the burner to the production. I always had that in my head, and I stuck with it. You know, and I just I have a lot of creative energy coming out of me, so I need uh, to do a tag, to do a throwy, to do a semi straight, to do a wild style, to do try to update a style. This one here, I really wanted to have a lot of movement, but spike it out. You know, like really have like a lot of sharp points and dissecting. Um, you know, in me, like I just have to keep pushing and seeing what's up. It could be me on a hike somewhere, and I see a plant, I see a leaf, and I'll look at that leaf, and if that leaf jumps out at me as like a bar, then I'm gonna remember that leaf, and I got to go home and meet. If you're with me, sorry, because the whole time I'm gonna be thinking in my head like, how can I work that into a letter? You know, like my brain is working that like I got to get this. even if it's 5 years later, I'm going to work that leaf into a whole style. Um, and that's just something that, and if I don't, then you don't want to be around me because I'm either obsessed with that or I'm not I'm grouchy because it's like I'm not able to get it out.
Well, this looks like you saw a leaf or maybe some cactus or a porcupine or something. It's it's incredibly spiky and almost like armor
Right.
or something.
Well, yeah, a lot of those guys that I mentioned, the Vulcans, especially him. Me and him spent a lot of time. He talks a lot about arming your pieces, and I know there was other old school heads that were talking about that as well. And this one was about that. This style is a very not no angle to come in at, without getting cut type of style.
Sure, sure, sure. I know that Randall Z used to speak a lot about that.
Exactly. Exactly.
So you go from this sort of style to this style.
Right.
And so, where does this style come in? How do you make that creative leap?
So this comes into that's the word I was looking for earlier. Hyperbolic chamber. If any fans of Dragon Ball Z on right now, that just being at that round table and being in that chamber with those old school heads, they're in you. And I know you know what I'm talking about, but they're just coming in my ear about style and math and the angles and why, and you can't be present without uh, having some kind of footing in your purpose. So this style comes out of, this is my second one that would be in the super burner category. And super burners, excuse me, is the concept of taking the traditional burner and pushing it to its extreme, pushing the actual style to the extreme, pushing the color to the extreme, pushing the size to the extreme. Those are like three major factors in it. And that this is the second time me doing it. And this comes after, I should have sent you a photo of the first one. This comes after I had a crazy accident years ago that left me like paralyzed from my neck down. So for a long time, and Vulcan would just be in my ear, and we would just talk on the phone for hours. And he was like, "Yo," he was calling a monochromatic, no outline, 3D style piece. He was like, "That's not a burner." And I remember at the time being like, "Yo, that's a burner." And he's like, "Nah, that's not a burner." And he was like, "There ain't no way that's a burner, and there's only 3, 5 tones of the same color." And at the same time, I had Neon out here saying the same thing. So left and right ear, I'm getting hit with this. And finally, one day, it just clicked in my head. I was like, "Oh, wait, I could do the structure as three-dimensional, but let me fill it in like a burner and slap an outline on it." And then with that, I always enjoy going crazy with my 3Ds on my pieces. So then I went like, well, wait a minute. What about the idea if you just kind of rip off the sticker on the top of your piece and you have nothing but 3D? So
Hmm.
that's the mentality, somewhat some of the mentality I have behind this style and this particular piece. And this is another one.
So I love the title Super Burner
Right on, brother.
because they really are super burners. This is you can't really get more complex than this. With whatever style you decide to do, your own particular style. This I couldn't imagine how you can make this more complex, maybe more colors or I don't know, just larger. But the scale of this looks pretty large.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
big. That was in San Antonio with Neon. There you go. Yeah, that photo. You got that one. Yeah, I think
It's
neons.
big.
I think the in between our pieces, that point is like at head, like that's so these that's like 6 feet. That point in between us.
Right. So major piece. This says San Antonio. So now you're not just painting locally. You're moving around and doing these burners. What's the reaction to people in the street when they're seeing these masterpieces?
This one it was Texas. I'm trying to remember the name of the paint jam down the Claw Caps maybe, and big up to all the guys down there in Texas. And so we were painting these pieces, and when I paint these, I'm out of my mind. Like I'm straight, like not here. I'm all in it, all about that. And it was raining, it was hot, and people's reaction was just kind of like, "Yo, brother, like you going for it," and that just kind of encouraged me more to like just do it. Um, it's really like I'm in my own world when I'm painting these.
And so, how many days does it take to paint something like this?
Uh, I want to say this was like over a weekend, but just kind of like 12 hours straight each day. Just going,
Intense.
yeah, just like full workout, full gym workout, mental workout, physical workout. You're living to paint the burner. You're living to talk about the burner. Like there's no room for anything else.
And so, how much of this is pre-planned, and how much of this is improvised on the spot?
Only the sketch is pre-planned, and then everything else is on the spot.
All the color work.
All the color work, yeah, that's all. That's all environmental, like response and whatever feeling you're going through at that particular time. Like that's all like right on the spot.
Incredible. And so, you have that, and then you have works like this, which another chamber perhaps, but still, a burner or a super burner nonetheless.
Right on.
I mean, is this what is this that we're seeing here?
So this actually happened in the middle of lockdown ish, and this was in Eugene, uh, Oregon. And no, Everett, my bad. Sorry about that. Thank you. It was in Everett. My brain skipped to another time with neon. And I painted this with neon. And this is at the museum up there in Everett. And we went up there, and we hadn't painted in a couple years together. So this is a mashup of his style and mine being in the middle and kind of coming out in the back, and then his style moving left and right. He's the orange, yellow to pink gradation, blue outline, and then I'm in the middle. And actually, this one I like to play off of it. It says neon. It's a neon piece where I took the E and the O, and he has two double N's on the left and right. And just we were old painting partners, so we know how to push pull, give or take. And since I paint a lot, and I was like, yo, let's just do your name. Let's just make it look one whole cohesive piece.
It is an impressive collaboration, and not something that I think that I've seen where you know a writer is taking the two letters in the center in that manner. And so you definitely, I feel, have to be comfortable and have to have that synergy to be able to do something like this. But pretty tremendous piece, and it looks like it's off the ground.
Yeah, that is a lowercase e. That's we have to use a lift to get up there. There's a walkway down below that goes down. I think that's like like 3 stories because that's a huge like loft style building. And I don't remember the measurements exactly, but there's a parking lot that the person who took the photo is standing and looking at the wall.
Right, amazing. And so, just I want to show the audience a few more of these super burners just to just share these wonderful pieces. Here's another one that is just has a tremendous movement through it, and then it looks like it has this sort of wave cutting through it, going across it.
Right.
You know,
So this
and
one
then
I want to this one's kind of like if you had like a nucleus, a ball, like like an atom bomb of style in the middle that was just pent up and blows out left and right, and then it spiral. That blowout is just like it spirals. That's the style out to spell out APEX, and and in that process, there's like this duality of like the whole bottom is like a play on like chroming your piece out. So it's all just chrome fill-ins on the bottom, and then the top is all just like at that time, like how I would fill in like 15, 20 layers of designs and shapes that at the time I would fill in just to separate the two, but at the same time bring it all together.
amazing, and you can tell it's not a small piece.
Nah, it wasn't small. I like to stretch out.
And so, how much with these pieces, do they always say your name? Is there always letters, or do you break away and at times do pieces like this that do not have letters in them?
Yeah. Well, if it's on the block, if it's on the street, in a traditional writer environment, then it's going to be a piece. It has to have letters, just to honor where I'm from and where it's at. If it's removed out of that element and it's not a traditional writer spot or a spot that I use to paint pieces at, then I find it hard. So if it's at those spots, I find it hard to not do letters. And if it's a new place and the architecture provides for newer styles that I'm doing, then I do stuff that's just the root of writing, excuse me, which is just the bar, just like the single stroke of a 3D bar. And then I just go, or, elements of the style.
I understand. It's an interesting approach to sort of separate, yourself or your art in that manner. So that you keep this street element or that tradition in the streets, and then you're able to sort of break away into new things when you're in these new environments. And here we go with another example of elements of that. And does this say Apex?
That one, I originally wanted it to say Apex, and I had to cut the X off because the wall shape when I got there was different than what I expected. And this one's huge. I'm trying to look for a reference. If you on the left hand side there of the image, there's like a green and turquoise bit, like your hand reaching up, touches that.
Got it. Yeah, it looks gigantic.
Yeah, this one I had a big lift on. So this one is just says it's APE. Um, and this one I just played off of what we were just talking about, of taking like terminated tips, points of bars, and mixing them in with my own style. And then in the background, I did the gradation with the earlier circle style on it, but mirrored. So it looks like a wallpaper in
Nice.
gold. And just, playing off of different ideas and concepts, pulling it all together.
So I wanted to show this other piece simply because I knew we were going to mention Vulcan. And so, I imagine that there's many folks on here that are not familiar uh, with Vulcan and who he is. Can you share a little bit about this work and anything else you want to share about Vulcan?
I know he's a very private individual, so I won't say too much about him. But this particular piece, some people on here earlier were talking about Las Vegas. This is in downtown Las Vegas in the Arts District. And a particular individual friend of ours put this together. And it was great because this is the first time that we have painted in a long time. And I want to say maybe this was 4 years ago. Time flies, maybe 5 years ago. And not 4 years ago. And so that's a Vulcan piece on the bottom stretching across. And then we were in Vegas. So I was kind of, this it's a style that I run, but at the same time, it was my idea was kind of like, yo, let me do a headpiece, kind of like the Vegas Showgirls or whatever, like loosely connected to that. Like, let me drop that on the top in the middle, and then we could just blend. I'm up, and then he's rocking left and right. We have like the gold to the copper background, also desert theme, landscape, that kind of joint.
You know,
But
I always have thought of these pieces as feeling galactic
right.
or futuristic, but also hearing you speak about it, it's also so organic and natural. Like you're saying, desert plants or a headdress. There's something earthly about it now that it's been mentioned, but it's definitely far out.
Well, galactic and earthly, it is all connected, and it's something that when you get into these mindsets and these flow states, and trying to push your individual style, you can't help but go there, and a lot of different ways to go there, and then you bring it back, you pull it all back together, and you try to present it, you paint it, and that's one of the biggest things about just allowing yourself to explore your style and see where you could take it. That it is earthly and organic and galactic at the same time.
Sure. And, I love, earlier on that you mentioned that you fell in with this group of individuals, the Vulcans, the Phases, these guys that, as artists, didn't really see boundaries and understood themselves to be artists,
Right.
writers, but above all, just artists. And that could do anything. If they wanted to make a sculpture, they make a sculpture. If they wanted to do watercolors, they do watercolors. If they wanted to play with letter styles, they'll do that as well. And so they didn't really have this constraint that I believe falls upon a lot of writers of only doing one particular style, of only painting in one particular place. And so, with this particular piece, when I first saw it, I was very happy to see Vulcan producing work, you know, because I feel like, I don't see it enough, whether he's doing it or not, and so seeing you guys connect really, and hearing you speak about it, it's really interesting to see you guys become collaborators in this sense and what that collaboration yielded. It's pretty exquisite.
Thanks, man. Yeah, yeah. It's those guys really want people to remember the roots of that being young kids. Just young kids just going against the system, and why you were going against the system, because you had like an idea, you had a feeling that you're trying to get across. And as we get adults, a lot of times, through different systems, we forget those honest, genuine sparks of creativity. And that's what, being an artist and being a writer, it kind of brings that all back, and if you hold on to it, then you can really explode and explore all kind of options.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that they've really been such important and maybe even almost unfortunately a bit of unknown
Right.
within the writing movement, but their ideas and their philosophies, especially Faye's, is so powerful and so important, and to remember and to encourage. courage, because we do sometimes get caught up in being adults and don't realize how powerful we really are, and how beneficial it is to be more open-minded and loose, especially as an artist.
Right.
And so, it's so easy to keep talking forever. We're close to speaking for about an hour already, unfortunately. And so I just wanted to sort of, just check in with everybody, say thank you for being with us for so long already. We are with APEXER, of course, as you know. My name is Alan Kett from the Museum of Graffiti. I am, much like APEXER, a student of this writing movement, as much as, unfortunately, now an elder of this movement, because time moves so quickly. And what we're learning about is APEXER's journey as a young writer into what we're seeing now is an adult artist, muralist, street artist, writer, whatever he wants to be without constraints, and in everywhere he wants to go. And so for the next few minutes, we'll go through some works just so you understand the transformation of this artist with this open mind that can go wherever he wants to go. And so, Apex, I wanted to show some of these works, because you really have gone in so many different directions. And so here you have a piece, a mural rather. Can you say anything about this work?
Yeah, let me see if I can speed through this one. So in 2007, I did a residency out here with a Chinese calligraphy artist, and we had set aside hours for our first meetup. And within 20 minutes, 30 minutes max, we completely understood one another, and we translated, thousands of years of calligraphy tradition with writing tradition and language. She talked about your approach with a brush to the wall, and I was like, oh, that's hand styles, that's can control, like this stuff like that. So fast forward through us sitting down, she explained to me that if you look at like Chinese calligraphy, you can have 4 strokes, and that's a house, and it has like all kind of meanings, but you can't do that house if you don't understand the stroke of one. And she said that to become a master, you could study for 10 years, and plus to become a master of a stroke of one before you could do anything else. And in that made me go, wait, hold up. If you think of my name with an A, and capital A and American or whatever that we know of, it's 3 strokes, up, down, and across. So I was like, what if we just knock out 2 of those bars, and there's only 1 bar? And at that moment, one 3D bar looked like a crystal to me. And I was like, yeah, I've always been into crystals and geodes and everything. And so then I was like, okay, so that one little bar terminated bit looks like a crystal. So here, this wall is taking my style, that's just all the terminated bits of bars, and stacking them like these particular murals I do like this are all about, they're like portals, they're like windows. And this one is all the chakras in the human body. Dead smack in the middle is red, and it pulls all the way out to your higher ethereal levels of chakras, or you can look at it as going in or out depending on where you're at. So that's all those colors that correspond with the human body. And I got this opportunity to have this huge wall downtown Sacramento, major thoroughfare, so I wanted to drop that as people came into the city, just to have a moment to pull that in.
Amazing. And does this mural still exist?
Still exists. 7th and J in downtown Sacramento. It was for Wide Open Walls Mural Festival. It's a great festival, interesting city. Yeah.
Amazing. And you mentioned Sacramento. I just wanted to say rest in peace to Jim Prigoff.
100%.
a Sacramento native who's contributed a whole lot to this culture and this documentation and support for artists.
Yeah, he pulled up on me on this wall and was just like, how are you going to cover my town and not let me know? It was pretty funny. And I was like,
I
I knew you were going to find me. And he was like, yeah, true that. You know, it was pretty funny. It was good.
I imagine that he would. And so just to sort of, show a couple of more pieces here before we wrap up, this was interesting. These sort of vehicle commissions
Right.
that have these bars. I mean, whose car is this?
That was Daryl Smith from the Luggage Store Gallery here in San Francisco. And he just had like this old VW flatbed truck. And he won for exhibit. He was like, yo, do you want to paint this? And I repainted it 4 times, I think. And I just kept playing with different, being limited by the shape and just exploring what to do with it.
Lucky guy.
Yeah, very, very fortunate. I'm gonna say I'm the lucky guy that I got to paint it.
Well, here you go. Here's another vehicle.
This one kind of is the one that started it all. This Mustang, the old studio manager of mine, my first art studio I had years ago. The studio manager would just, come around and, he respected and supported everything that we did. And then one day he says, look, I got this old Mustang. I'm going to redo it. You want to paint it? And I was like, yeah, let's go. So he took every panel off. And the idea that I had for this one, I wanted that speed to be in it. So you see off the front, it looks like a bar. The idea was that the Mustang hit a piece of mine. And then it just like spun out across the car. So it spins off the front tire, gets whips around, and then sucks off the back tire there. If you at the top, if there was a way to see it in this photo, it's kind of like you think of aerodynamics, like the bars whipping off the back window at the top, pulling off to the back. The whole interior, I painted the whole interior panels as well. He still has this, and every once in a while, people send me photos of it on the freeway.
Incredible. Incredible. So we're at the hour mark, and I know that you are currently just taking a break from work, working on a project to do this talk with us. And so I don't want to keep you up much longer or out or in much longer. But I really want to thank you for your time and for your patience with the technical glitches at the start, and for sharing. I prepared in advance and read up a whole lot about you ahead of time, but I wanted to ask questions that no one's going to ask
Right.
about your past and about foundation and about the writing movement, which is what we really specialize and focus on here. But the entire arc of it. And so just spending a little bit of time focusing on those beginning years and sort of where you were getting your wisdom and information from, and what sparked that creativity or that openness in you, and you being able to share that with us is very valuable to us, and I think very valuable to our audience, so that they can have that understanding that anything is possible, and that you can sort of be whatever type of artist you want to be and go with your style wherever you want to go. And also the idea of pushing these super burners to
Right.
really push yourself. There's not too many people that do that, or maybe there are many people that do that, but it's a special group that
Right.
pushes themselves and pushes themselves to that extreme. And so we're thankful to have you on here with us as a member of that special elite group of artists that push themselves to really master style in that manner. And so thank you. And so for all of you that have been with us, my name is Alan Kett. Up top is APEXER. Thank you for your time. Normally, these interviews are saved on IGTV for later viewing. So hopefully, Apex, when you log out and end this
Gotcha.
thing, just save it and it'll be on your page. and we will download and copy it and share it on us so that our audience grows and everybody can continue to appreciate this conversation and everything that you shared.
100%. And let me know any other time, you know, we want to catch up and talk about any nook and cranny of the culture. I'm with it.
I love it, and I appreciate that because I will definitely hit you back.
Likewise, brother. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Of course. Thank you, and good night, everybody. Good night.
Good night.